What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited version of this week's episode. And I'm going to try something a little different here. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, then you'll get to kind of follow along and see all the screen records that I'm going to utilize. For those of you who are listening on Spotify, or I'm on Apple Podcasts now, if you're listening there, shout out to you, where you can't see the visuals, I'm still going to try to post this as an audio-only format and see if I can record this in a way that it's still coherent. This is relevant for today because I'm going to be looking at some of your websites, and if you're just listening to the audio of this, you won't be able to see what I'm seeing on my screen. But I'm going to try my best to present this in a way that it still is easy to follow along if you're just listening. Also, just a heads up that I have a bunch of fun stuff going on in my life in the next 6 weeks or so, but they're just like jam-packed. So I'm probably going to streamline my videos a little bit, make them a little shorter or a little simpler or less edited. So thanks for bearing with me while I'm just kind of having some fun in my personal life. It has been a hot minute since I've done a video for my series where I review your websites. Honestly, I somehow kind of forgot that that was a series that I've been working on. So I thought today would be a great day to pick up that series again. I believe now this is the 4th video I'm making in this series, so I'm going to mix up the structure a little bit today. In the prior videos in this series, I was evaluating your websites based on 4 variables: the 5-second rule, trust building, can you help me with my specific issue, and is it relatively easy to figure out what the next steps are. I spoke about all those variables at length in the prior videos, so I'll link to those prior videos in the series below. Today, I thought it might be interesting to just look at one variable that I would argue is the most important variable out of all of these variables, and that is, drumroll please, trust building. Because honestly, I've seen a lot of really beautiful looking websites out there that are really easy to use. It's easy to tell what somebody is about, but still I'm just not so sure I can trust the person. And that doesn't mean that you're not trustworthy. It just means that your website isn't necessarily conveying how trustworthy you are. And I've also seen plenty of websites that are kind of a hot mess from a design perspective and are not even totally clear what a particular therapist focuses on, and maybe not even totally clear on what the next steps are, but there's all kinds of features that help me build trust with that therapist that I might go, okay, websites might just not be this person's thing. They probably DIY'd this, but I can see through the sloppy website to see that this is probably a really trustworthy person. And I've booked my own personal therapist with folks who have the sloppiest websites, but I felt like there was some trust building going on in there. So all the variables that I go over are important, but honestly, if you can nail the trust building one, I mean, that's the most important thing, because that's kind of what our whole job is, right? To be trustworthy and help people through their most vulnerable things. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about trust building. I think it's pretty apparent why it's so important to build trust with potential clients. I mean, if someone doesn't trust you, they're probably not going to book with you. If somebody feels like they can really trust you, it's a lot easier for them to make a decision about whether it makes sense to book with you or not. My guess is that pretty much most of us can get on board with how important it is for folks to develop trust with us in order to book with us. But it's not necessarily so apparent how to go about building that trust if we're not actually yet sitting in the room together or sitting in our virtual therapy session together. We gotta kind of communicate that before they've ever talked to us. So how do we do that? And let me clarify, I'm not trying to set this high bar of you need to build so much trust just from your website that somebody's willing to kind of entrust you with their entire life. That's not how relationships work. We build trust in little bitty steps at a time. So I'm just looking for how to build enough trust that somebody says, yeah, I'm ready to reach out and learn more, hear about what the next steps are, see if they're trustworthy when I email them or call them. So you can keep building trust after that initial moment, because that's how healthy relationships work. So since we're not looking to build this impossible level of trust all in one moment, I don't think you need to include every single bit of trust building available all into your website, because then your website is just going to be overwhelmingly massive and probably impractical. But with that said, there are little cues that I'll observe in therapist websites that when I see them, it makes me go, oh, I already feel more comfortable. I'm already curious now to learn more. Let me hear more. Let me reach out to see if this person kind of fits some of these cues that I'm picking up on. And since websites are pretty one way in the sense of like, we're just putting text and pictures and things on our website for somebody to observe, and we don't get to do that nice back and forth interaction that we do in session, it can feel pretty tricky to build trust. I think a lot of folks try to deal with this by describing their trustworthiness by saying things like, I'm very trustworthy, I'm very humble, I'm very self-aware, or things like I value self-reflection and learning and growing, etc., which is nice, but sometimes when somebody says, I am something, it could instill distrust. If I came to you and I said, I am absolutely the most trustworthy person you will ever meet in your entire life, which we're not going to get into this today, but reminds me of some politicians. For me, when I hear that, it just makes me go, what are they trying to hide? And maybe they're not trying to hide anything at all, and they're just trying to communicate something, but that's not the way to communicate it for me to buy into it. So what are some of the cues that help people see that we're genuinely trustworthy without us saying, I'm so trustworthy, you should book with me? So let's go over some of the signs that, at least for me, signal like little cues that somebody just might be trustworthy. To me, one of the biggest heavy hitters is humility. And of course, again, not just saying, I am so humble, but any way to acknowledge that we're not perfect, we're capable of making mistakes. We're always looking to observe ourselves to see where we might be making those mistakes, since we understand we are capable of making those mistakes. And also observing our humility helps our clients feel an equalizing sense when they see like, okay, Marie's acknowledging she understands she messes up. So it kind of levels the playing field rather than emphasizing the us versus them power dynamic that can come up if we sort of say like, I am the expert. I am so equipped to help you. I don't make mistakes, essentially, could actually create more distrust. And honestly, I think the other cues I'm about to list here really stem from humility, just a sense that I'm a person, I'm a human being, I'm capable of making mistakes. And so from there, all these other bits and bobs will pop out as well. But let's go ahead and list those. Self-reflection is a big one because that's something that is easy for us to name out loud, not just saying, I am self-reflective, but we can show that we're being self-reflective in the way that we speak about ourselves. It could sound something like, as I reflect back on my earlier years when I was going through this hard thing, I realized that I didn't have these tools that if I had would have helped me so much. Once I found them, it was really helpful, right? So that's a self-reflective statement without sort of just waving a flag saying, I'm so self-reflective or I value self-reflection. It's just, we could just disclose something that shows self-reflection. I think another cue of trustworthiness is flexibility, because again, if we embrace humility as a value, then we understand we might make mistakes. If we understand we might make mistakes, then we realize we might need to pivot. I was working on this thing with this client. I thought that was the right path and then realized that that wasn't quite working. So we collaborated and we pivoted. I'm flexible to make that change. Again, we communicate it not by saying I'm so flexible or I value being flexible, but there are ways to convey on our website. For example, I view therapy as a collaborative process. So though I may have a sense of what direction we're headed, I always invite your feedback and I'm flexible to change paths if whatever we're working on isn't quite working for you. And I already hinted at the next cue, which is openness to feedback. Because if we're being flexible, we need our clients to give us feedback in order to know when we need to flex and pivot. And if we're capable of making mistakes or just, missing the mark in some way, then we need to be open to feedback so that we can correct the direction that we're headed and do something more helpful. And I'll quickly name a couple of other cues of trustworthiness that at least make me go, ooh, I'm interested. I'm curious to learn more. If a therapist shows on their website that they're open-minded, that they have a growth mindset, and that they're willing to do hard things, those all cue to me little signs of trustworthiness. Because if a therapist is willing to do those things, then it helps me trust that they're willing to walk me through doing those things as well. So all of that said, I thought I would just take a quick peek at a couple of your websites that I haven't looked at yet from this series and see if I can find any of these trust building cues or offer some gentle feedback for how you might kind of expand what you have to help build more trust with potential clients. And as always, thank you so much to all of you who've contributed your websites. It is an incredibly vulnerable thing to say, sure, you can publicly comment on my work online, and it's not even one where we are having a discussion here and you can sort of say, oh, yeah, let me explain what happened there. I get emails from some of you all from the prior videos in this series where you say, oh yeah, I slapped that thing together in an hour, and I think, oh my goodness, if I'd known that, I would have been so much more gentle because you did an incredible job for it being an hour, right? So keep all of those things in mind, and I will do my best to be respectful and gentle in how I give the feedback as well. And for those of you who are just listening to the audio, I will do my best to just kind of read aloud whatever I'm giving commentary on so that even though you're not seeing what I'm seeing, you can kind of follow along with me. All right, so let's dive in to our first website of the day. We got Vanessa Vitiello. Oh, I apologize. I'm already having trouble saying names. I'm just going to say Dr. Williams for now because I know I'm going to mispronounce your name. I'm so sorry. The imagery on this website and the colors and everything are already peaceful and soothing, but I have to remind myself I'm just focusing on the trust piece, but good job so far. Let me go ahead and focus on the about section more so. Okay, so I'm just scrolling down to the About section on the homepage, and I already see a little signal that we just talked about, where Dr. Williams says, we will collaborate to set an insightful course forward. I mean, this is just like a few sentence blurb on the homepage, and right in the first sentence, it says this. So Dr. Williams is already touching on a trust-building approach. Let me go to the About page and read the full thing. Okay, so Dr. Williams' About page reiterates a lot of what we saw on the homepage About section with a little bit of extras about their specialties and also naming some of their values in their therapeutic approach. So the second paragraph here says, I take a warm and empathic position with my patients, ensuring well-being for their whole selves, and rely on building a genuinely meaningful therapeutic relationship, valuing authenticity, humor, and compassion. And then the third paragraph elaborates further on this kind of collaborative experience. Here at the end of the third paragraph, it says, through this collaborative approach, we will become curious about your experiences and find ways to build skills and self-understanding. So I'm seeing a lot of signals of what Dr. Williams values. We value authenticity, curiosity, collaboration, and as I scroll through the rest of the About Me page, they talk about their specialties, they offer teletherapy and in-person, and I'm looking for, I think, a little bit more, right? So probably what Dr. Williams could do to help build more trust with potential clients is, in addition to naming these values of being empathic, being authentic, being collaborative, is to share something that exemplifies that. So that could take many forms. You could share an example of what it looks like to interact with a client. So if you're wanting to emphasize your value of collaboration, don't name a client that you work with or that type of thing, but you might say something along the lines of, I make sure we have regular check-ins to see if the approach we're using is still working for you, and we make adjustments accordingly. I love to invite your feedback, right? So there's ways to communicate the value with just like little tiny examples of what that actually looks like. Like if we had a video camera in your sessions, like how would we be able to observe you being collaborative? Think of it that way. And you could apply that same question to all the other values. How could we capture on video you representing your value of empathy? How could we capture you on video representing authenticity, right? What does authenticity look like? I love laughing with my clients in session when appropriate. Or, there's little ways to just signal, oh, that feels authentic. I appreciate that. So I don't want to write the script for you because whatever authentic looks like for you is going to be different than for somebody else. That's the whole idea. But looking for like those little minute stories. You don't have to share your whole life story or the details please do not share the details of what you've done with specific clients, but these general concepts of here's what this might look like to sit with me and have that value be embodied in our session together. That can just really help teleport a potential client to like sitting on your couch or sitting with you in virtual therapy, and what that's going to feel like to laugh with you or to collaborate and give feedback, all of those sorts of things. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for letting me give feedback on your website. It is beautiful, by the way. I think you're doing a fabulous job, and I say this in all videos in this series, but your website might be just already working magically for you and you don't need any feedback. I'm just kind of sharing where I could see things improve, because there's always room for improvement for all of us, my own website included, very much so. Okay, let's take a look at another website. At the top, this one says, Dr. Jenna Therapy, rediscover yourself and finally feel secure in who you are. Online LGBTQ plus therapy in Minneapolis and throughout Minnesota, right? MN is Minnesota, for queer, trans, and non-binary adults. Love that. So I'm going to scroll down and see if we can find a little about section. Okay, so this one is unique to Dr. Jenna. I appreciate so much. It's so subtle, but I see you, Dr. Jenna, and this makes such a big difference. So Dr. Jenna is very clear that she focuses on LGBTQ plus care, and right in this little second paragraph in her About section on the homepage, she says, it's all too common for LGBTQ plus folks to doubt ourselves or face mental health struggles. So we just learned a lot just from her using the word ourselves instead of themselves. And I can only imagine that if I were on the website and I saw that word ourselves, like I would just feel an immediate sense of relief. Okay, so let's carry on to the full About page and see what else we find. Okay, I'm already loving the About section. Dr. Jenna introduces herself, again, reiterates that she's focused on empowering LGBTQ plus people. I mean, we're very clear on her specialty. And then she goes into sharing a little bit of self-disclosure about herself. And this is something I've talked about before, but I know can become a stuck point for so many therapists, is like, is it okay to self-disclose on our website or with our clients in general? And the rule of thumb, of course, is self-disclosure is helpful if it's for our client's benefit. Now, sometimes we might think it's for our client's benefit when it's really for us, but some amount of self-disclosure can be quite helpful. And I think this is a great example here that Dr. Jenna shows on her website. So I'm just going to read the next two paragraphs after she kind of reiterates her specialty. She says, as a bi queer person, I've struggled at times to find a therapist specialized in LGBTQ plus mental health. It was common for me to find LGBTQ affirming therapists listed online. What I needed, though, was a therapist who was not just affirming, but also knowledgeable about LGBTQ plus identities and queer trans mental health. I'm so grateful for the LGBTQ plus specialized therapists I found along the way. They helped me improve my mental health while simultaneously talking about the subtleties of being a queer person in our society. I want all queer and trans people to have that experience. I mean, this is just a beautiful example of disclosing enough about her own experience to essentially show the shared identity that she has with the clients that she serves, and also how she understands how transformative it is to have a therapist who really gets it, and that she would love to be that therapist for you, just like she has gone through her own self-reflective, self-awareness experience in seeing her own therapist. She didn't write her whole life story of all the ups and downs. She didn't write her whole life story of, whether there were any mental health struggles for her and all of that, but it was enough to show, oh, she gets it, and she's willing to do the work, and she's operating from that space when she cares for her clients. So good job, Dr. Jenna. Okay, then she continues on in her About page with a section that says some things clients have said about me and lists out some of these qualities. I have a calm presence. I'm easy to talk to. I'm not a blank slate. You will have a sense of my personality and my humanity through our work together, and on and on. So some of these are values communicated as things clients have said about me, which is sort of an interesting take. And I think this last bullet is especially useful, where she says, I'm emotionally open and responsive to you. I empathize with you by allowing allowing myself to be moved by the things you're sharing. This may include me joining you in tearfulness during sessions. I believe there are things in our life worth crying for. So that's a great example of naming a value, here framed as things clients have said about me, but I assume that she also values that being emotionally open and responsive as well. And then elaborates by kind of answering that question, okay, if we had a camera on during your session and we were watching you be emotionally open and responsive, what would that look like? And then she says, well, sometimes I might cry with you. Like, that is so helpful to hear that. Like, oh, good, I have a therapist who's comfortable enough to cry with me. That's a lot of information in just a little tiny sentence. Okay, lovely. This about page gets an A+. Good job, Dr. Jenna. I am going to see if I can look at one more website for this video. Ananda Tree Therapy, Healing Through the Arts. And then we have a picture of what looks like a young child kind of leaning against a beautifully ancient looking tree. Okay, as we have, I'm just going to go ahead and look for just the trust building pieces here. As I scroll down, I don't see an About section. It's a pretty short and sweet homepage. So let's go ahead and click to the About tab. About Saloni Cigar. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. This is a really lovely bio. And Saloni, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Saloni starts by giving a bit of background about themselves and then goes on to share their approach with clients and then some kind of like fun facts about themselves. And the background is quite a beautiful story that Saloni immigrated from India to Vancouver in 2017. That's pretty recent. That's a transition. And yeah, they say here, this transition was a challenging time for me that brought valuable growth and insight, which I share in my work. Absolutely. And then they go on to share their background, their professional background. Before becoming a therapist, they were professional makeup artists. And this provided great learning about issues like perfectionism, stress, overwork, etc. And they go on to share that this is where they discovered their passion for listening and helping others express their emotions. And then they say, after arriving in Canada, I began my journey towards wellness and healing that led to a career change and ultimately a transformation in my own relationship with self. I draw a great amount of inspiration from nature and my practice of yoga and meditation. So that's really lovely to hear. I mean, that already just creates a sense of warmth in hearing a little bit of your story. And after that, Saloni steps into talking about their approach with clients. I'm passionate about working with children, youth, and their families, and they carry on about, creating a warm environment and all of that, which is lovely. And Saloni, I think if you wanted to expand on building trust in your About page, I would create a little bit more of a bridge there between this section about your background and the section about your approach. Because I heard you acknowledge, like, here's this story. You clearly have gone through a lot of self-reflective work, been through challenges, and come out the other side. And that's also clearly informed your motivation for pursuing this career path and helping other folks, presumably in a similar ways that, you've benefited from having some help or working through things. And then you go on to your approach and saying, you have this trauma-informed, collaborative, child-centered approach, etc. And it'd be really lovely to kind of hear almost a little bit more explicit, like, connecting of the dots, because I can kind of read between the lines and make some assumptions that are probably accurate about how those two things are connected, your background and your approach. But if you made it a little bit more explicit of like how that actually looks, again, if we had a camera in your session, what does it look like to have a child-centered approach, for example? Is it that you sit down and play together and you sit on the floor together? I mean, whatever it looks like for you, give a little bit more detail of what that looks like. And that would also help, I imagine, the parents of the kids that you work with to kind of see that and build trust with you as well. And also, while we're on the topic of building trust, back to your homepage, I would definitely give a little bit more information about yourself. A picture of you would be great because it does look like you're a solo practice. So you are the face of this business. And even just like a little teensy bit about you some of your little story in a shorter blurb on your homepage, I think would also be really helpful. Well, I think I'm going to pause here as far as going through the websites. We'll save the rest, which there's still plenty more, for another video in this series, and maybe I'll focus on some other aspect of folks' websites. If there is an element of your website that you're looking for more feedback on, let me know what those are in the comments below, so that then I might be able to take that lens and apply it to future videos in this series where I'm looking at your websites. And thank you again to those of you who've submitted your websites. There are many more still that I haven't gotten to, so if you haven't seen yours pop up yet, it may come in a future video. For those of you who had your websites featured in today's episode, check your email. I reached out to you to send you a little thank you, so keep your eyes open for that. And I think we're going to sign off here. And hopefully for those of you who are just listening to the audio, I hope it translated over well enough. And if you do have feedback on how I could improve the podcast, definitely let me know. I am just learning as I go. I don't know how to make podcasts. I know how to record audio and, cut it down in size and things like that, but I actually don't know anything about podcasts. I just like listening to them. So hopefully, I'm sure there's plenty of feedback I could do with. So if there are things I can do to make it more palatable or enjoyable or whatever for you, definitely let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback. Well, I enjoyed this take on giving feedback on your therapist websites. Y'all are doing a great job. Honestly, when I look at your websites and I think about my first website, oh gosh, I don't even know if I have a picture anymore. Listen, websites have come a long way since I started in 2012. Back in 2012, most therapists didn't even have a website, and the ones who did, they weren't good, and mine included. So I'm just amazed to see just how incredible your websites are. So thank you again for sharing them, and I look forward to seeing you in another video in this series. Until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.